A couple of things you've been asking me. One of them is, can we hear the Motion Plus against one of the old men of the block at the moment, the Denon Envaya 250 BT? And the other request I've been getting a lot of is, well, you keep playing your custom settings. Let's have a listen to the custom settings against the default setting. Now, guys, I did do an EQ video all about my EQ settings, which compared normal EQ with flat EQ and my personal EQ. I can't keep putting custom settings alongside the default settings in all my videos because they're going to get overly complicated, and they're complicated enough as it is. However, in this video, for the sake of this one-off event, I'm going to have the Motion Plus with my custom settings against the Denon 250 BT, and I'm also going to stick in at default mode. Default mode is bass up mode. They are the same thing, and you'll see why I don't bother with bass up, because it overcomplicates something that, at the end of the day, my custom settings, I'm thinking it pretty much nails it against the bass up. However, this is about the Motion Plus against the Denon. Quick look at comparison specs. Now, you think, well, it's slightly smaller than the Soundcore Motion Plus, and you don't really play this one much, so yeah, probably not much of a contender, because you always saying pound for pound world champion, the Soundcore Motion Plus. Yeah, but it's not really quite straightforward as that, because the point is £80 speaker. The point is that's what makes this fantastic value, that it can hold its own against more expensive speakers. Doesn't mean it's better, and that is a case in point. The Denon Envaya 250 BT is a £160 speaker. It's twice the price. Now, why would you pay twice the price? We can get the Soundcore Motion Plus, which seems to be a pretty decent value for money speaker, for 80 quid. Why would you pay £160 when you could actually get two of these for the price of one of those? Well, I have been one of those people that actually has been playing this instead of, I've got both speakers and I normally play the Motion Plus instead of the Denon Envaya. Now, there's a couple of reasons why. One is there's a battery drain issue which hasn't been resolved after no less than 3 years. It's still doing it. The vocals on this, for me, to my ears, a bit recessed, they're not up front, and they never break free of the speaker. If this was 20 quid, I'd say fantastic value for money. But the point is, I'm judging it at £160 level, whereas with the Motion Plus, I'm judging it at the £80 level. And that's really the point here. You've got to always take these things into context. So quickly, a look at the comparison specs. We already know you're going to get two of the Motion Pluses for one of the Denon 250s in terms of the battery. Now, this is the other interesting thing. On my testing, I get 7 hours at maximum volume with my custom settings. Make that clear, because I keep getting questions. Yes, my battery testing is with my custom settings. Originally, I only got 6 hours, 45 minutes. There have been question marks about it. I retested it, I got 7 hours. I'm also getting people showing me teardowns and pictures and evidence that their Motion Plus is a 7.4 volt speaker, a pair of 3,350 milliamp batteries to give 7.4 volts. But I couldn't get 7. Maybe I'll tear it down myself one day, but it's impossible to get 7 hours if this was running at 7.4 volts. The only way this could possibly be right is if my versions, and I've got a pair of them, of the Motion Plus are running at 3.7 volts. And then with a 6,700 milliamp battery, I could just about get, with brilliant battery management by Anker, I can get 7 hours. But it does appear there's possibly, don't quote me, but how else would you explain it? People are telling me they're only getting 3 hours on max. Some people are telling me you only get 3 hours on max, and other people are sending me evidence, showing me evidence that the others, that there's a 7.4 volt version, and that's why you're getting 3 hours. So my conclusion is, and until proven wrong, there have been, or there may be at this point, two versions, a 3.7 volt version and a 7.4 volt version of the Motion Plus. The difference being 3.7 volts you're going to get better battery life, and possibly 7.4 volts you're going to get a bit more oomph, which is the point of running at 7.4 volts. More instant power, but at the cost of battery life. So that's an interesting question. Remains to be seen. Maybe I'll get in touch with Anker and ask them about that. They both have decent codecs. We've got the aptX codec in each of these speakers, The older speaker has Bluetooth 4.1, not even 4.2. We've got Bluetooth 5 in the Anker Soundcore Motion Plus. They both can be paired in stereo. However, it's a no-brainer pairing these. Now, I know people say, well, mine's not quite working like that. My pair has been a no-brainer. You pair them once, and then every time you turn them on after that, they automatically pair. With the Denon, you'll have to physically, manually pair them each time, and it's a little bit laborious. It means holding them both down for several seconds to pair them. Only the Motion Plus is USB-C, as you would expect, being the more modern speaker. They both do have auxiliary inputs. Neither of them can be used as power bank. They both have a speakerphone facility, 27 watts versus 30 watts, 750 grams versus 1050 grams, just over a kilo, 40 millimeter woofers versus 50 millimeter woofers, and tweeters. That's a huge thing. That's a huge difference between them. We actually have separate tweeters, 30 millimeter tweeters in the Motion Plus, and of course they both have passive radiators, whereas I think it's one huge passive radiator on the back for the Denon. In terms of latency, well, only really my Motion Plus was usable in terms of YouTube, 80 milliseconds versus 180 milliseconds. So that's like kind of noticeable but get away with, whereas that is noticeable lip sync lag. In terms of battery life, I haven't tested. This is one of my older speakers. I never got around to actually doing my own battery tests, whereas this is my own battery test, 7 hours. Now, first thing I'm going to show you is frequency response. Frequency response is different. I'm going to measure them both at 66%, and I'm going to measure both custom and default mode on the Motion Plus at 66%. I'm choosing 66% because that's normally around the sweet spot for all these speakers. Of course, as you go up the volume scale, the actual frequency response is going to change in a significant way. You're going to have a lot more bass, or most often you'd have a lot more bass, and you'd want a lot more bass at the quieter volumes to make up for how your ears actually perceive sound. And as you get to the top volumes, most of these will limit or reduce bass because of distortion or just for power issues and to go a bit louder. But 66% seems to be their sweet spot in terms of the flattest frequency response and still getting some bass. So that's what I measured.
The Denon. It's a pretty flat response with noticeable peak at 14 kilohertz and then around 7 to approaching 9 kilohertz in terms of actual frequency response, peaking about 80 dB, dipping around 74 dB. 6 dB means the perfect plus or minus 3 dB, bass down to mid 60s. What I like to do, heart of the music, look at the bass, take off 3 dB, 76 down to 73. Would say again still, yeah, solid bass mid 60s. Motion Plus in default mode, that's a whole different ball game. Massive roll off, 3 kilohertz down, indeed with a peak at 3 kilohertz. And we're talking 84 dB down to about 76 dB, so plus and minus 4 dB. Again, bass down to mid 60s. My favorite method, heart of the music, 79.5. Take off 3 dB, 76.5, and indeed solid mid 60s. Similar bass extension to the Denon, but with a whole different frequency response. So Motion Plus in my custom mode, obviously it goes louder, but we've smoothed it out as far as we can. My personal settings do add a bit of bass oomph. Not much you can do about the 3 kilohertz peak, but the fact that we've boosted everything beyond that means we have smoothed it out. So now we're talking 86.5 to 81. So now within the plus or minus 3 dB, strictly speaking, they would say bass was down to the high 60s. But reality, I like to do it this way. Heart of the music, 83, take off 3 dB, around the 80, and indeed slap bang mid 60s. So all three speakers, you could say, playing down to mid 60s. Indeed, if we line them up now, Motion Plus with my custom settings, and there's the Denon, quite similar. Bass almost identical, and the big difference is the Denon extends further, but it's a peak. It's a bit of a boost, likely to sound sharper, possibly more shrill, but then just where your ears are most sensitive around that 3 kilohertz mark is the peak on the Motion Plus, maybe making up for the lack of extension.
when you actually play a track in the real world and it starts doing its bass limiting and its real-time dynamic processing, differences from what it looks like on a frequency chart arise. But it's part of the whole picture. And even when they're highly accurate, doesn't really tell you everything about how a speaker was it. So it's an indication of what to expect down the line. Let's listen to them and actually see what happens in the real world. I'm going to say 50% test. Of course, I'd get the volumes to be as level as I can. So that means the Denon's at 49%, default mode bass up 56%, and the louder custom mode 43%.
You're out on your own, a million miles from home, feeling the weight of the world on your shoulders. Child, don't forget who you are, don't lose your head or your heart. I'll bet my life on your stars, you'll be dancing, dancing on the moon. I'll bet my life, you'll be dancing on the moon. I'll bet my life, you'll be dancing on the moon. I'll bet my life, you'll be dancing on the moon. Dancing on the moon. Dancing on the moon. Maybe my compass was wrong, and I'm still on my way closer each day to where I belong. I'm still rolling the dice, praying sometimes it don't last that long. I'm losing my faith, I'm walking away from what you knew all along. Mama told me before you leave, if there's only one thing you remember from me, child, when you're out on your own, a million miles from home, feeling the weight of the world on your shoulders. Child, don't forget who you are, don't lose your head or your heart. I'll bet my life on your stars, you'll be dancing, dancing on the moon. I'll bet my life, you'll be dancing on the moon. I'll bet my life, you'll be dancing on the moon. I'll bet my life, you'll be dancing on the moon. Dancing on the moon.
Motion Plus default mode. Motion Plus my custom mode. My custom mode plays a little bit louder. The other difference is we're taming that 3 kHz peak the bass up inherently has. We're gaining a little bit in the bass peak, 65 Hz. The bass up has a little bit in the deeper bass, 50 Hz, although it is a rolled off 50 Hz. Compared to the Denon 250, Motion Plus is upper bass heavy. That's whether it's in default mode or my custom mode. However, it does give it a bit of punch rather than sounding overblown in the upper bass to my ears. And the Denon has the deeper bass here, minus 36. That's 2.5 decibels up on the Motion Plus. In custom mode, a decibel up in default mode. The other main difference is the Denon has a peak, a boosted peak, between around 7,000 and 9,000 Hz. It also has more extension, and at these volumes it also has a peak at 15,000 Hz. It's going to add sparkle, some clarity.
So in terms of bass up versus custom, to my ears, and you may or may not agree, bass up sounds dry and hollow. And with my custom settings, to me, it sounds more exciting, more upfront, and they've got a bit more fizz, sounds more balanced. Against the Denon, now, Denon does really well. You probably won't get quite a sense of what I'm saying about vocals, because to understand why I say it's a recessed, you're going to have to hear it via the actual drivers of the speakers itself. However, in these A-B comparisons, the Denon does really well, as you would hope for a speaker twice the price. I would say this is a mature, smoother, maybe more relaxing sound, whereas this is an exciting, fizzy, buzzy sound, maybe a bit more tiring in the long run. However, even having said that, it seems noticeably more clearer, fizzy, there's more air, there's more fizz. At these volumes, I do prefer the Denon, and because the Motion Plus for me, never really shines till you start pumping up the volume. 50% wasn't going to shine anyway. And the Denon has a really unique sound to its bass. I'm not going to say it's the most accurate ever, but it's quite appealing. It sounds quite different, I think, to almost any other speaker I've heard. So it's very, very prominent without being overblown or boomy, but it's very prominent. You'll pick it out straight away. There is a certain element, and I can't quite get me handle on it, what it is about the bass on the Denon, but it's quite unique. It's quite an attractive feature of the sound of the Denon. I do like that, but what I don't like is vocals don't jump out of the speaker. They're not as in your face as it is from the Motion Plus. We'll go up in volume. We'll go to 70%, which means 69% on the Denon, 77% in bass up default mode, and 63% in my custom mode.
Great. Oh, oh. I never thought I'd say it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm light on my feet. It's like I'm a better me. V2.0 or 3. Yeah, yeah, yeah. A better me. I only knew what I knew of love from you. It was so one-sided. I only knew one love till it went away. Now I know a little more 'cause I found real love and it's not one-sided. Now I know a little more and he's gonna stay. And now I'm falling, falling into new arms. I'm all in. Finally had a breakthrough. Thank God there's no one like you. So why was I scared to lose you? Silly girl, what a fool. 'Cause now you're gone, I'm great. Oh, oh. I never thought I'd say it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm light on my feet. It's like I'm a better me. V2.0 or 3. Yeah, yeah, yeah. A better me. For so long I wasn't happy and it showed. I hated that you never told me I was beautiful. I knew that you were right, but I was scared to be alone. Had to love myself enough to let you go. 'Cause now you're gone, I'm great. Oh, oh. I never thought I'd say it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm light on my feet. It's like I'm a better me. V2.0 or 3. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Better me. Oh, oh. I never thought I'd say it. I'm light on my feet. It's like a better me. Version 2.0 or 3. Gotta love myself enough to let you go. 'Cause now you're gone, I'm great.
Motion Plus, my custom mode, default mode. The difference at these volumes, noticeable more upper bass weight by decibel to the Motion Plus in custom mode, about the same in the deeper bass 50 Hz. Again, my custom mode tames that 3 kHz peak in default mode and adds a little bit at the high end, around 10,000 Hz, a little bit more even all across now. The Denon 250 has more balanced upper bass, but to me it's still a decent kick in that upper bass peak on the Motion Plus. I mean, it's some 3 dB up on the Denon, but the Denon 2 dB up at 70 Hz bass peak and a tad behind in the deeper bass 50 Hz. You still notice around 9,000 Hz the boost on the Denon.
Again, not much to add from what I said before. Bass up, pretty dull, even in custom mode compared to the Denon, lacking a bit of fizz, lacking a bit of clarity. There is something of the high end of the hi-fi nature to the Denon. However, it's not in your face and exciting in the same way as the Motion Plus is. But even with or without my settings, the Motion Plus is more upper bass heavy. Not in a particularly natural way. It's more accurate in terms of the bass on the Denon, but it's not overdone. It sounds, to me, it sounds just nice and punchy without sounding totally out of sync with the rest of the frequency response. So although it is overblown, I quite like it, whereas normally I'd find that sort of push a bit over punchy, but I find it works well in the Motion Plus. But I would still give the Denon a win for most people at these volumes. Just for me, in real life, it's just a case of whether the high-end boost is a little bit too much for you. I mean, we got the 3 kHz boost on the Motion Plus, so you pay your money, it takes you a lot of it. It's going to come down to how your ears work, because all our ears are a bit different. And how you listen and how your ears are doing and your age, it's going to make a difference between how you actually hear the differences between these speakers. We're going to push it a bit more. We're going to go 90%, which means 89% on the Denon, 77% for custom, but we're at 93% if you was in the default bass up mode on the Motion Plus.
Loves me as she needs to know I love her. I wonder if we'll make it through this summer. Just wanna touch like back when we were younger. Yeah. Why don't you love me, love me, love me? Touch me, touch me, touch me no more. Why don't you love me, love me, love me? Touch me, touch me, touch me no more. Love me, love me, love me. Touch me, touch me, touch me. Love me, love me, love me. Touch me, touch me, touch me.
I'm so divided, starstruck, but haters got some indecisive. I'm over fighting, I just can't wake up, cold and sleep alone. This boy's some trouble. When he's around, my problems seem like double. His stupid eyes put me on nice, so no, no. Don't slow me down, don't wanna do this solo.
Why don't you love me, love me, love me? Touch me, touch me, touch me no more. Why don't you love me, love me, love me? Touch me, touch me, touch me no more. Love me, love me. Touch me, touch me, touch me. Love me, love me, love me. Touch me, touch me, touch me.
Around 90% for the Denon. You can really see the headroom custom mode gives the Motion Plus 93% in its default bass up mode, 77% equivalent in custom mode, about the same in upper bass, decibel up in the bass peak 65 Hz for custom mode, but again around the same in 50 Hz. That EQ doesn't seem to touch the 50 Hz mark. Again, taming the 3 kHz peak, and the Denon again with its 9 kHz peak, a noticeable dip, 5,000 to 7,000 Hz, not there on the original or on the Motion Plus custom, but holding sway, the 65 Hz bass peak. There's more weight on the Denon, even at 90%, and nothing in it at 50 Hz.
I do think if you like proper deep bass, you may find the Denon's presentation more to your liking, but it's really neck and neck between them in terms of bass, a bit more upper bass, and then the bass peak, depending on the track, one or the other, and around the 50 Hz mark, pretty similar, again, depending on the track, but there isn't that much in it, and I really do think it comes down to how your ears are tuned to listen, because they both have, well, you've got a major roll-off anyway, past like 10 kHz, 12 kHz on the Motion Plus. This extends more, but with a boost, which you may or may not like, depending on how much you can actually hear at those frequencies and how sensitive you are. Now, we're all pretty sensitive at 3 kHz, and that's where it has its peak. So you may find that overdone, or you may find that absolutely in tune with your ears. So I think, again, you're not going to. I am not unhappy with either of them, but they're quite. Although on ABs they may seem quite similar, there are enough differences that in the real world you will like one or the other. I'm going to go maximum volume, and this is really going to be the clincher. Maximum volume, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
I don't want you back. Is it too much to ask? I don't want you back. I don't want you back. No matter distance I cover, you always there to smother. Please let me find another. Feels like you're my silhouette. I'm not easy to forget. Pretend that we never met.
trying to keep my cool. I see what your colors shining through you. Yeah, I do. That I do. Is it too much to ask? I don't want you back. I don't want you back. Is it too much to ask? I don't want you back. I don't want you back.
Maximum volume, custom mode on the Motion Plus. The headroom is massive. It makes you wonder what they're thinking of with their default tuning when we have 3 decibels headroom in custom mode. We're 3 decibels louder. Although weirdly, even though pushed in the EQ, we've got a bit more upper bass in a bass up mode. But the lower bass with 2 dB up at 73 Hz. And again, EQ doesn't touch 50 Hz. They are the same at 50 Hz. But overall, more body, more volume, more headroom in custom mode. The Denon is way behind the custom mode on the Motion Plus by 6 dB. Well, 5.5 if to be accurate, but that is huge. Bass peak isn't that far off at 31 dB. But the main difference is the body is now falling away from the Denon. It's retaining some bass, but there's no oomph because it seems to be holding on to some bass at the cost of clarity and high end. You can see the body on the Motion Plus in bass up mode lacking now in the Denon. That bass peak that we know is boosted around 9,000 Hz for the Denon is now the same bass up and way behind, of course, the Motion Plus in custom mode, which is still a full-bodied sound. The peaks say the same story. No matter how you measure it, Motion Plus in custom mode has massive headroom, even over its own default bass up mode and over the Denon.
And there is the real difference. You've got massive headroom on the Motion Plus. It's one of life's great mysteries why default mode is like, what is it, nearly 3 decibels off potential headroom that they removed from the default mode over custom mode. What you can actually get. Yes, with some tracks, with my tuning, that bass is going to distort a little bit. Personally, it's not a deal breaker to me. Depends, you know, how your ears, again, are tuned. Some people can't have even the slightest hint of distortion. And personally, especially with my Charge 3, I could live with a whole dollop of it if other things were going right for me. As long as it's not killing me driver, for me it's not a deal breaker. Denon, just, you know, as you hit maximum volume in comparison to the Motion Plus, yeah, it's still holding up in the bass, but the rest of the frequency response is dipping away. It's no longer a balanced sound, although it's still a reasonable listen. But you've still got body, you've still got bass. When you hit custom mode, Motion Plus, you can still tune it how you personally want it, but the headroom is there. It's £80, so there is the difference. You could get 2 of those for one of those, but even one of those goes like 6 decibels in terms of lufts louder. There's not a major difference. At the end of the day, no matter where you're coming from, you sit with both of these speakers, the Soundcore Motion Plus in custom mode will sound more exciting. Vocals will be more upfront and in your face. Well, this will sound more laid back. It will sound nice. It will sound balanced. It will sound mature. It will sound hi-fi-ish. But it won't be exciting and in your face and upfront as the Motion Plus. And depending on how you listen, there's one major deal breaker. Possibly more relaxed, possibly more tiring, possibly they're both decent speakers. That is smaller at the end of the day. You can get a pair and you could have your mini hi-fi. As I said, I did have a pair. It did sound great. My only issue wasn't as airy as I would like as a pair at the price. Now, if it was the same price as the Motion Plus, maybe I would still have a pair and be really happy with it. It's just the incredible value, and it's still incredible value, isn't it? Because I'm saying it's close, and I'm saying the difference is really going to come down to how you listen, your particular taste. They are both capable of sounding really, really nice. £160, well, I can't say it's not worth £160.
you know, it does have that unique nature to its bass. It does sound good. It can put a smile on your face. But ultimately, you can get two Motion Pluses for the same money. And ultimately, oh look, okay, it is that is heavier. Maybe this is more travel friendly. So look, they're both worth probably the money that you pay. But the Motion Plus just is a whole league above it in terms of absolute pound for pound world champion. It's value for money. That's what we're talking about. So anyway, I hope you got a handle now on which speaker you would go for, the main differences between them, and quite honestly, you'll be happy with either of them, I'm pretty sure. And I hope I answered all the questions. As usual, I thank you for watching and watching to the end if you've actually made it to here.